Hello. Is it still morning time? So good morning. Thank you all for joining us. We do have some seats up front. If you wanted to come forward, see the screen a little bit better. But we'll get started here in a minute or two. We're just waiting on our technical staff. All right. Good morning, everyone. Um, we're going to go ahead and get started because we do only have 50 minutes. So this is going to be some speed dating. So good morning. My name is Althea Walker. I am Nest Purse, Hopi, and Gila River, and the co-director and community resilience lead for the Climate Science Alliance. We thank you all for joining us here. We thank the Kumeyaay and those who call this land home for having us here and welcoming us here, and we thank you all for that. It's very beautiful. So today we're going to be talking about the Climate Science Alliance. We're a small nonprofit based out of San Diego County. We work closely with tribes across Southern California, but that work is certainly expanding. But we just want to talk with you about how we're doing our work in advancing a paradigm shift in how climate action is visioned, led, and implemented. So with me, I have our founder and lead advisor, Amber Paris here. Megan Jennings, she'll be talking about a specific project we're partnering on and how our model is implemented through that project. We have Sergio Morales here in front, and then also Will Madrigal, who's missing in action. So we'll be sure to let it be known when he walks in the door. So if you could please advance to the next slide. So if you haven't heard about the Climate Science Alliance, we were founded in 2015 by none other than Amber Paris over here, and where she has put relationships first and has nourished those relationships over the years and has led to all these amazing projects that we're able to partner and work on together. So we thank her for being that person, that leader, bringing us all together. And through her actions over the years, this model has been created of how we do our work, how relationships are at the core of our work, and how they lead to various projects over our lifetimes, and that we don't just focus on one project to bring us together, that it's about us coming together and projects happen here and there. So we do have a booth out front if you would like to learn more about us. I can also pass out some QR codes. You can learn more about us, our website, and specifically this model that I'm talking about of how we do relationships and how that leads to projects. We have that in a printed report if you're interested in learning more about how we do our work. But certainly feel free to come and visit us at our booth, and we will share more. We can build relationships with one another and continue to get to know each other. Next slide, please. So I'm going to have Will Madrigal here, our tribal partnerships manager, talk about how we bring people together through our working groups.
Achama, thank you, Althea. I just blew in here, everybody, because I was lost. And my boss, Dr. Paris, just left me hanging. So if you feel that way, I got you. You know, it's just Just great to be here. Mihuan Umo Emem, and William Madrigal Jr. and Kuntunga Kuiai. I just wanted to introduce myself and one of my languages, Kauai, which is a tribe just a little north of here, northeast of here, in the Riverside County area and top part of the San Diego County area. But our binational working group, our tribal working group that we have at the Climate Science Alliance is a really special type and unique type of group because it is comprised of all the tribes here in Southern California represented. So we bring together professionals, not just environmental professionals, but also professionals that are in cultural resource management, emergency operations, fire and safety as well, because we know that their unique impact and their unique insight is going to be vital to moving forward and planning adaptation strategies around climate change and around the effects of climate change. And how those affect each tribe is unique and different. Next slide. So through the use of our ecological knowledge, you may call it cultural knowledge, you may call it, passed down orally. This knowledge is how we sustain our communities. So over the last 250 years, we've been colonized and told that we can no longer use this knowledge. We're told that it doesn't matter, that it gets overlooked by Western science and things like that. So we've decided, that we're not going to accept that narrative. We're not going to accept, the downgrading of our knowledge. We're going to put it into action. We're going to put it into use. And so what we do is when we convene as a tribal working group on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, we use culture bearers. We invite culture bearers to convey the knowledge that's been imparted to them. We invite cultural practitioners, anybody that practices their traditional ways and puts that knowledge to action and practice. And so what we've been able to do is have these very awesome conversations around empowering the next generation of culture bearers, the next generation of how do we tackle this climate change problem? How do we tackle this ongoing drought and loss of animals, loss of plant species, etc.? Well, it's really insurmountable if we try to do it on our own. So coming together regularly as nations, coming together with partners, our non-native partners, with our climatologists, our climate scientists, we'll be able to have these very, very important, critical dialogue. And those dialogues actually translate into conceiving real programs and projects. And so we can showcase some of those right now. Next slide. So we used a model. We came up with this model because we decided to listen intently to how tribes use traditional ecological knowledge. What are some of the barriers to practicing the traditional ways of stewarding the land? And so if you go to our booth outside, you can see that this pamphlet will be there, and you can thumb through it and you can see examples of how we've implemented a unique model, a traditional ecological model, and doing the climate change partnering work that we do. And it's a report of what we've been able to accomplish, showcasing all the different programming that we've done, trainings that we've done, and it speaks for itself, I think, because it is a different way of doing things. It's a paradigm shifting way of doing things. Instead of it coming from the top down, trickling down, we're putting tribes at the top. We're saying, okay, we have this money, and we know this is a critical need. How do you want to go about initiating this, and how do you want to go about leading this project? And how can we, as an entity, a support entity, support you doing that, and realizing if it's a dream or if it's just a goal that the tribe has, whatever it is, you're leading it. It's yours. It's not us to come in with all the technical and scientific expertise and tell you what to do. No, it's about reciprocating knowledge. It's about it's about supporting tribal voice. It's about supporting tribal sovereignty in all areas of sovereignty. and it's the new way to do the work that we do. As for us, we've been doing it for the last 7.5 years, so I think we're pretty good at it. I mean, we're still we're still learning. Thank you, Melody. But yeah, we're still learning. We still have much to learn, but we've been able to accomplish a lot. So I hope you'll be able to come by and see what we've been up to. Next slide. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. So I want to invite Megan Jennings up, in which she will be sharing a specific project of how we're implementing this model and bringing partners together.
Thanks, Althea. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Jennings. I am a research scientist at San Diego State University. I live and work on Kumeyaay lands. My people are not indigenous to this continent. My ancestors are from Northern Europe. But part of what I find really important in the climate adaptation work that we try to do, as Will was saying, is to do it in community. And I think traditional ecological knowledge and Indigenous stewardship is a really important way that we can advance the goals that we have for making our landscapes more resilient in the face of climate change. And so my role is to act as a facilitator to help make that happen. I am a scientist, so I do offer science that can complement traditional ecological knowledge, but I view one of my most important roles as listening. Hearing what, as Will's saying, this is a paradigm shift, right? Mostly scientists walk into a room and they want to tell you, let me tell you what I know, let me tell you what we've learned. That's not my job. My job is to say, tell me what you know, tell me what you're concerned about, and is there a place where science can help you advance what you are trying to accomplish, what I think we are all trying to accomplish together. So instead of telling you about a project that's already all done, we thought it would be really fun to actually have you play a role in a project that is ongoing, where we are trying to take this model and actually get that input for what is important to you and how does that take place in putting together a strategy. So this is the Southern California Montane Forest Project, and our goal is to create this climate-informed conservation strategy. It's a partnership of the Climate Science Alliance, myself at San Diego State University, the U.S. Forest Service, the U.S. and the USGS Southwest Climate Adaptation Science Center. And it's really important the role the Climate Science Alliance holds as sort of this boundary spanning organization to help make these connections that make this, all this coordination possible. They hold a place where I can come, every month to this tribal working group and say, tell me what it is you need. Let's get feedback on the project and let's make sure your wishes and desires are front and center in these projects. So if you can advance to the next slide, let me tell you a little bit about why we're doing this project. So here in Southern California, we have these sky islands of forests like there are in some of the other states across the Southwest. High elevation forest above about 3,600 feet where we have hardwood and coniferous forest. As you can see in the map, that's the dark green and the light green. They're relatively isolated, they're not connected. It makes them more susceptible to the impacts of climate change. And when we've got 25 million people down there in the gray, you see around Los Angeles and San Bernardino, there's even more impacts to those forests, and we're losing them at a rapid rate because of fires, because of insects and disease, because of just the change in climatic conditions. So we wanted to put together a strategy. We're also often ignored because we're not the Sierra Nevada. California loves to highlight the Sierra Nevada. It's a beautiful place, but we also have beautiful forests here that need protecting. And they're really important places to many of our tribal partners who do not, at this point in time, have much of an opportunity to steward these lands because by and large, these lands are managed currently by federal government, right? It's public lands. But it's very important that our tribal partners have a say in how these lands are managed, in particular, as we try to make them more resilient and protect them. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges, I sort of briefly mentioned this, but we've got rapidly intensifying stressors and disturbances. You all see this, it's happening where many of you are as well, but we've got, warming, drought, precipitation regimes that are more variable, right? We just had a hurricane here in Southern California. So there's both ends of your spectrum. We went from drought to a hurricane. We've got ozone pollution, other kinds of pollution, right? From all these people and cars and all of that. And that results in, habitat loss. We've got invasive species, the gold-spotted oak borer, something in particular we're really concerned with here in San Diego County, that it's attacking our oaks. Again, a super important plant relative to many of our tribal partners. And all of these are connected with what's happening to the climate as well. So they're just getting worse with increasing climate change impacts. Next slide. But there's some really important things that these forests offer. I don't have to explain this to you, but this is how we share with everyone the value of these forests, right? All those 25 million people that live here, some of them don't even know we have these forests, let alone all the value that they bring in existing. And so those are things like they protect our watersheds, right? All of that rain filters through those forests and is held together by those trees that have root systems holding the soil in place. Some people don't like the term ecosystem services, but right, there's other values in having that forest remain forest. And in particular here, there's recreational opportunities, and of course, they're very important cultural places. Next slide. So I've said this before, but I can't say it enough. These forest loss, actually Southern California, there was a paper recently about how much forest loss has occurred in California, and Southern California was occurring at the most rapid rate. It's being driven by this tree mortality that in the picture below there, that happened in the early 2000s. We saw a mass mortality event, and it's starting again now. We've had a lot of stand replacing wildfires. We have a lot of bad fire, and we want to get more good fire on the land, but we have a whole culture that has, pushed that good fire out and has relied on fire suppression. So how do we get good fire back on the land to help heal these forests? And climate change obviously is making all of this worse. Next slide. And what happens is these overly dense forests, as you see on that picture at the top, that's on Palomar Mountain here in San Diego County. Back in the early 2000s, they're more susceptible to drought, disease, and insect mortality. So how can we make, again, these forests more resilient by tending them and tending them in a different way? And I think that's where we can look to Indigenous stewardship and think about what were the practices that were suppressed along with fire being one of them, but what are those practices that we should re-engage with and invite our tribal partners to once again steward these lands that were successfully stewarded for millennia since time immemorial. Next slide. And part of this, the motivations for organizations like the Forest Service is, there's implications for biodiversity. They have threatened endangered species to protect, obviously concerned about severe fire and what that means for people and life and property. And trying to avoid, losing more of these forests. You can see that picture. That's not far from here in the lower corner there. That was a stand replacing fire in 2003. We're actually right at about the 20-year anniversary of that fire, the Cedar Fire. For a while, it was the state's largest fire. And we lost almost all of the trees on Cuyamaca Mountain, just a little bit east of here. And so we want to avoid having more of that happen. It's come back as ceanothus, not as trees. It might not ever be trees that get coniferous forests again in my lifetime, but hopefully with work together, more of these forests can remain forest. Next slide. So what are we trying to do with this conservation strategy? Well, really importantly, we want to build a community of practice, but one that looks different than the community of practice that typically was federal agencies working together, state agencies. We want tribal partners to be at the forefront. We want science-based guidance on threats and desired conditions, but that doesn't mean just academic science. I think tribal science is a key part of that. We want to take an all lands approach so that we're not sticking to jurisdictional boundaries because climate change doesn't care. The wildfires don't care. So why are we drawing boundaries around things? And we really want an opportunity to develop partnerships, work together with joint projects, invigorate co-stewardship, bring that to our landscape, and to co-produce this with partners and stakeholders. Next slide. And so part of this is we come out and we ask, what do people want to, what do you want to see? I mean, it'd be easy to go into a room and write this strategy and say, okay, now we're going to do it and not get any input at all. But that's not meaningful. And I don't actually think we accomplish anything that way. And so we've been going out, getting input from people about what do you want this to look like? What are your priorities for this? So big picture, you can see biodiversity is at the center and partnership is, but so is Indigenous and climate adaptation and regeneration and prescribed burning or cultural burning. So all of those are things people have told us they want to see in this project. And so we're working on building that in a couple of different ways. Next slide. So one is this framework for strategic management decisions. Part of the way work has gone on thus far is sort of what is the low-hanging fruit? Where can we get something done quickly and claim acres, right? Because that's the way public land management often takes place, is you have to claim acres and report that you've gotten something done. But we want to be more strategic than that. What are the places we cannot afford to lose? We're going to lose some of these forests. I think that's just what's going to happen. We can't treat it all fast enough. but what are those priority areas we don't want to lose? Or what are areas where we have the greatest chance of having an impact? So that's what we're trying to do here, is think about 3 key processes. And really the goal is to keep forest, right? That's just big picture what we're trying to accomplish. So it makes it a little easier to home in on, what do we want to evaluate? So we want to evaluate exposure to threats. So what are places that are already maybe a little more resistant to climate change impacts, where we have a leg up and it's maybe a little easier to make a change to the condition and protect something. I think of those as like the places where it's inherent to the landscape. It's things we can't necessarily change, like, you're on a south-facing slope, so you might have a hotter fire if we get fire burning. The next piece of it is to identify vulnerabilities. So I view those as the things we can change. So tree density, we can change tree density. It's overly dense because we suppressed fire for too long. So where do we want to prioritize reducing tree density to make it resilient to the next fire that comes through, so we get a good fire, not a bad fire? So we're identifying those. And then the third is priority areas. What are the places that are most important to protect? And so in this sort of 3 key process strategy, the first piece we've kind of already evaluated, right, because it's inherent to the landscape. But the second 2 are completely defined by people like you. And so that's what we want to do today. We're going to talk about vulnerabilities and priority areas, but I just want to tell you that part of the reason we're doing this is so we know how much are we trying to do. Are we trying to resist change on the landscape by making small changes? Or are we trying to make bigger changes to accommodate what might be coming, the next fire, for example? Or are things so far off that we need to transform to a completely different landscape, to a completely different system, so that it will be resilient in the future? Or in some places, we might have to say there's no action, and we're okay with that. But we get to prioritize rather than having it happen to us without making any choices. So next slide. So with that framework in mind, what I want to do right now is ask for all of you to tell us what you think. Now, some of you may be saying, well, I'm not from Southern California, so why are you asking my opinion about this project? I honestly don't think it matters. I think these same priorities and vulnerabilities are probably things that are relevant across the country. It's what are the places that are most important to you? So these are the 3 questions that I'd like to ask you all to participate. If you're online, then you can join in by typing stuff into the chat. But I've got 3 questions here. So the first one is, what vulnerabilities should we address and prioritize in stewarding and conserving Montane forest? What are the things that you think make the forest at risk that you want to be able to change, you want to play a role in changing? The second is, what are your priorities for the places we work to build resilience first? Is it things like species or relatives, communities, cultural sites? What are those places? What do they look like? What are key characteristics that might help us identify who to engage in the work? And then finally, what kind of stewardship practices and traditional knowledge would you want to see at the forefront of this conservation strategy? So we've got the vulnerabilities, the priorities, and then those key stewardship practices and traditional knowledges. So what I'd like to ask y'all to do, we have a couple of facilitators who are going to help here, and we've got 3 different boards across the room. So we've got vulnerabilities here. I think we've got priorities in the back, and then we've got practices on the side there. And so we have some sticky notes. You can jot those down. I'll sort of call out when when it's time to maybe start thinking about a different one. But write down your ideas and on your sticky note, and you can come stick it on the board. And one of our facilitators will be here if you have questions about, like, what does this mean? Or can I write this down? I mean, you can write down anything you want is the answer to that question, but they'll be there to talk with you about if you want to say more than you've put on a sticky note, or you just want to write something right on the flip chart, you can do that too. But encourage you all to share your ideas with us, because I think the more ideas we hear, the better off we are. Okay. Okay, great, thank you. Perfect, thank you.
Can you make it clear that you can move around as you?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I got distracted. Okay, and so we're passing out these sticky notes. Feel free to come over and chat with. We'll have, as I said, a person at each one of these. Come over and chat with each other, and then move around. So I'm going to call out probably about like 7-minute intervals or so. So if you've been thinking really hard about one and chatting with people, maybe that'll trigger you to move on to the next one. So you can sort of give us input on all 3. And then what I'll do at the end is just kind of give a quick wrap up of what we've heard thus far in the room. But this is what we do. We want to hear from you. So please share with us, based on what I've shared today, and maybe think about the forest in your own backyard, on your lands. What would you want to see there? And that's okay if it's not immediately relevant to Southern California's forest, because I think it's important regardless. Okay, have some discussion.
All right, we have our first sticky note back here at priorities. So the question was, what are your priorities for the places we work to build resilience first? And our first sticky note, so thank you to this person, it says more cultural burns. Hey, I have 3 priorities coming to me. Drought and pest management, whole ecosystem approach. Other agencies don't know how to take care of forest stewardship and prioritize water, conserve, and protect.
And these are vulnerabilities you identified? Okay, great. Thank you.
Remove invasive species for another priorities back here.
If you'd like to, or I'm happy to carry it for you.
And
your
feel free
choice.
to pass your sticky note to the team and we can put it up at the appropriate. All right, Will's going to share with us what he has over here. Stewardship practices and TEK.
Question number 3, couple of responses. More traditional restoration, ecology practices, and techniques. So yeah, kind of broad, but right on point. It makes me think of we're in acorn season right now. We're acorn people down here in Southern California and parts of Arizona. Yeah, are you any acorn people in here in the room? Yeah, are you getting your acorns yet, or are you waiting? You got them already? Was it a good crop, or was it a bumper crop, or was it a? It was good. Where are you from?
Cheatgrass. You guys
San
from the
Carlos
Great
Apache.
Basin?
Nice. I didn't even know you guys
I
ate
got your number.
acorns. All right, right. Protect Oak Flat.
We have
Nice.
some, but not like you.
Thank
all.
you.
Yeah.
Another stewardship practice: good fire and
Yep.
forest.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean,
Forest mismanagement is a lot easier to fix. And the start. All right. Incorporating traditional youth council and to ensuring youth minds are not left behind for their future. That's a great message, right? We can't forget our youth and our future leaders, right? They need to be a part of this. We're going to start this work, but the next 7th generation has to carry it on. Number 3, involve tribal peoples, preserve plant species, stop devastation of land. Definitely. Definitely. We can all agree on that.
I will.
Erosion, flora and fauna, invasive species. Yes, invasive species is an issue. Thank you.
Hey, Will, can I share a few from online?
Sure.
Oh, so we do have a few people signed in online, so we're going to hear from them now.
All right, we got something from Terry McCartney. So vulnerabilities are loss of culturally significant foods, medicine, teas, fiber, and gathering sites. Loss of healthy forests increases aridification. Loss of habitat for birds, mammals, and other critters. Unknown knowledge of future. Just a second, sorry. Unknown knowledge of future climate creatures creates uncertainty of what to replant. Another one from Zachary Erickson, adaptive management, which is based on feedback from ecosystems and landscapes. We are working on landscapes and in a climate that has shifted since many cultural practices have been removed from the land. And then from Terry McCartney, priorities, reduce surface and groundwater diversions, change water management language from water demand to water requests, increase outreach and education of where your water comes from. And then from Irene Evanston, we can train travel, wildland fire crews to properly survey and conduct controlled backburns.
Thank you. Is there a way to save the chat? Okay. Megan, do you want to share some of the vulnerabilities?
Sure. And I'll just say, as I'm about to share those, if you've been thinking mostly about one, maybe it's time to switch over and think about another one and maybe I think maybe you guys have just been doing all of them, which is cool. But if you're like me and you get hyper focused on something and you need a reminder to shift gears now. So let's see, over here on vulnerabilities, we got quite a few with invasive species coming back. My friends here from the Great Basin mentioned cheatgrass. That's a problem in a lot of places. It's not our primary problem here in Southern California, but it's one of many problems. So invasive species is definitely a big one for us. Let's see, we've got water quality, oak borer and other infectious pests, wildfires, fire home development, that's certainly a big one for us here, and new mining. A lot of invasive species. Need better or more policies and other infrastructure to support local collaborations. And actually, I saw one on the priorities back there too, is about like equipment and infrastructure. I mean, those are part of what we're doing here is an attempt to do a mapping exercise, but we fully recognize that there are capacity issues that need to be addressed simultaneously, right? We can map all we want, but actually getting things done on the ground means we have to work together. Thank you. More effectively, and that means having resources and capacity to do so. Oh wow, this is a great one. Circumstances have changed since colonization. How do we account for those changes when reintroducing indigenous practices? So if people have thoughts about how we do that better or what kinds of conversations we want to have around that, please feel free to maybe add some sticky notes to that to share with us. Do you have more you want to share?
Yeah, number 3, we got a lot of cultural burning, traditional burning. We have cleaning up waterways and springs. I guess some of the things that are on our priority list as environmental, cultural departments, but we just maybe haven't got around to it. Maybe we need a little support. Maybe we need to come together and talk to other tribes and see what their strategies are, right? So that's definitely a common need and a critical need. And capacity building too, right? So we got training and employing tribal youth to do this work. Wow. And those of you who are affiliated with Unity and with other, national tribal youth organizations, I haven't been a part of it since I was young. So I don't know if they're addressing this. I hope they are. But why don't we create those opportunities and avenues for them to just be able to sign up, And let's get our act together and say, no, we're creating this position, this internship, this training for you, our tribal youth, our next leaders. So maybe we could talk more about that. Fuel management, stewardship practices, locally driven decision making. Yes. fuel for fire, pest management, water, all wildlife, cultural practices, harvesting, cultural sites, and people education. People and education is very important. Stewardship practice. You know, we focus on our communities a lot, but we also need to focus on the outsiders, right? Those living within the greater community, whether it's in the county or the township that you live in, the city you live in. You know, we need to come up with educational methods to get our message across to them. It's like, no, we need to do this with you, along with you. We need your support, and this is going to be for the benefit of everyone.
All right. So I think what I'll do is share some of the ones that Sergio has been collecting back here for our priorities, and then maybe open it up for questions and comments. This is really how we run a lot of these, is just have somebody to help take in what you're suggesting, and to think about what that means, and then sometimes that leads to more questions. So would love to hear from you all what you think. But let's see, back here, more cultural burns. These are priorities. Protecting native species, erosion control, public infrastructure. Let's see, stop pinyon pine over harvesting. I know, over harvesting of important food, fiber, and medicine are a concern. Drought and pest management, wildlife habitat, and of course a couple that are focused on homes and communities. So right, all of these things are important. That's what we want to try and capture in what we're doing. Protection of cultural and traditional resources. Here was the one I mentioned earlier, funding for better equipment. So right, some of these are things you map and some of them are not. And some of them are things that a person could map, but we are not mapping. So part of what we do is try to create a platform where if you have important cultural sites or sensitive information you would like to layer on to the mapping product, we've created that place for you. But that way there's no, it's not my job to touch that or engage with that information or share it with anyone else. So, but just to give you a place where that can all be integrated into the same place. So we think a lot about how do we integrate that information and make it a place for you to consider the other priorities that you have that maybe are things that we don't map in our process. Was there anything else you saw in here, Sergio, that you wanted to comment on?
I think this one, like priorities should include ID culture resources with tribes, protect these areas first, use tribal knowledge to ID, protect during activities, and then I saw a lot of protect. So protect keystone species that regulate the environment. So they're already doing the job for us.
Oh, and the other one I saw up here that I wanted to comment on is other agencies don't know how to take care of forest stewardship. So yes, I mean, that's part of why the idea behind engaging more people. And I think Jolene added one to the front there, vulnerabilities, involve everyone. And that's part of what we're trying to do here and in all of this work that we do, because there's not just one way to do something.
Yeah, they're anti-being the forest, I think. Hey. Those of you who follow anti-bee and all that. But I think that, this goes with land back too. Those of you who are into environmental justice, land back conversations and actions, there's plenty of examples of tribes here in Southern California who have been given the ability to steward forest lands, for example, traditional lands that have traditional sites, villages, gathering areas, etc. The Palma Band of Mission Indians, which is about an hour north of here, where I grew up and where I live currently, is one of those tribes. They worked out a contract with the Forest Service, and there's some tribal members here too as well. Ruben, could talk more about that, but they've been given 5,000 acre forests at the top of the mountain where the old village sites are, and they've been able to steward that land by thinning brush, traditional burns, gathering, and the protection of and recording, the cultural resource sites that are up there. So when we talk about land back, that's the first step, I think. Showing that we have the capacity as tribal nations to steward our lands, having the right people in place is next. The mountain crews and the people who are going to be up there regularly. That shows the agencies like the federal government, the U.S. Forest Service, the state of California, that we are capable of doing this work, and we can continue to do this work like we always have for thousands of years. So that's something that we need to see more of. Thank you.
So does anybody have any questions or comments about either this project or just about this, this demonstration of how we run this model? Yeah, in the front. And while I walk towards you, I'm going to say we've just changed the slide. We do, if you are here local in Southern California, on November 6th, we're having a whole workshop, a whole day workshop to do this same thing. So please join us. You can scan the QR code to register. Go ahead. Yes. Only? Yes. That's all right. Okay. Sorry, he asked if it was in person, and I said yes, and he said in person only. So this is one of many sessions. We always make sure that we do this as an iterative process, and we have had some virtual meetings. We will have more. So if you are local and you cannot make this, or Southern California is where you are and what's important to you, please reach out and get on our mailing list, and you can participate in an online one if that's better for you. Okay, go ahead.
My name is Tom Gusty, Bishop Paiute Tribe, and my question is, I think, with the Bishop Paiute Tribe of the Owens Valley and all the tribes within that area, is my question would be, where are the tribes in the forefront of the planning stage of this before any of the priorities or stewardships or any practice implementation? Like, where are the tribes seat with other agencies? Other agencies.
I think that's a really good question, and that's part of what I view my role in this whole project is to encourage more of those relationships and get towards a place of co-stewardship. I think in some cases that already exists. There are some tribes that, for example, the Forest Service is working more closely with. We have some of our colleagues in the room where there have been partnership projects, but it's not enough. And so that's part of why we're trying to do this project in a way that brings these tribal priorities and vulnerabilities to the forefront and gets to a place. So Southern California is a really big place. And so one of the goals is to get to these smaller collaboratives. We're not going to implement projects on that whole region-wide level because it's just too much, but having these smaller collaboratives. And I think that's where we really want to make sure all of the tribes are represented and have an opportunity to put their needs and concerns at the forefront is at those local collaboration level, because that's really where the rubber meets the road. Not to say that having input on the entire regional strategy isn't important, but I think where the rubber actually meets the road is where we want to foster those strong relationships that, again, exist to some degree, but not as strong and not as inclusive as it needs to be.
Too much.
What's too much? Oh, I just mean like if we were to try and develop projects across all of Southern California, it's too many different groups that would need to be, right? Like if you're doing something in this, we're ranging from Santa Barbara all the way down to the Mexico border. And so I'm not trying to force the implementation of projects across that entire landscape all at once. We're letting it be more locally. We're doing a prioritization with this strategy and providing some tools that can be used across that entire landscape, but the actual planning of projects and implementation of projects would happen at that smaller scale, just because there's different entities involved as you move across the landscape. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. But it also, it does make sense, thank you. But I was just asking about like the forefront of like having a master plan agreement with the Forest Service. Do you help with that?
I would love to. The federal government is a big agency, right, or a big entity, and it's a big ship. It moves somewhat slowly, but I think the more we prod, thank you, the more we prod, the more we'll get there. But I agree. I think moving towards a master agreement with all tribes would be the place to go.
That's okay.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to jump in. This project in particular is really important because the reason the Alliance is involved is from the very beginning that this idea even started was why we got involved and our tribal work group was involved. So before anything was created or decided or they formed other advisory groups or stakeholder groups, the tribal work group was part of that. So we are trying to do exactly what you said, is that this is one project on a stepping stone to co-stewardship of all ancestral lands. Our goal is to use these projects to build these bridges so that the tribes are at the forefront and making the decisions on all projects. So these are like, we have to show that proof of concept, right? We have to show these non-tribal agencies that this is how you do it. It takes time, but the right people are in the lead, and our Indigenous colleagues need to be leading all this work. So that is what we're trying to do with this project, is to show that we know that, right? Everyone in this room knows who needs to be taking care of the land and reconnecting with the land. So we're trying to get there, and I really appreciate your comments.
Thank you for that. I'm trying to work on the same thing up in our area. So I'd like to get with you and communicate more. And one thing you said is the right people. And I think, the agencies are looking at our leadership and all this stuff. And I think that's the wrong people. So that's kind of a thing. I think these people are professionals, and our community members are the right people. So this is kind of awesome how you guys are doing all this.
And
Yep.
thank you. I agree. Part of what we're trying to do is make sure that it's not just tribal leadership, but elders and tribal employees and all the people, cultural practitioners, everybody who wants to be involved.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Melody Sees. I currently work for the Mesa Grande Band of Mission Indians, but I've been involved with Tribal Science Alliance for a minute. And I just want to say that, what they're saying is what they're doing. Everything, all of this stuff came up, like it's been in planning for a while. And this young lady right here, she sat there and she listened to us tell her, like, no, we don't want to do it that way. We don't want you to do that. We don't want you to put that information in there. They listen to what the tribes are saying. They listen to what the tribal people are saying. And everything they do is based on the group. And this young man right here, he's really picked up the ball, and he's keeping everything going, and he's keeping us all like involved. He doesn't let us just like fall off and come back and go, oh, I want to participate again. But anyway, they truly are doing what they said. They're starting with the tribal work group, and they take everything we say into consideration. It's not a scientific or an alliance decision. It's always a group decision.
Okay. Oh, sorry, we need a mic. I got it. I'm coming. Oh, sorry, I think we're going to do this one. Right? Yeah.
So this is from Suzanne Marr. What do you do next in your workshops to assist tribes in funding and taking action?
That's a great question. Well, part of it is to figure out how we make these sort of more localized collaboratives work together and where the funding is needed. There's a lot of money coming out of the federal and state governments for this work. For those of you who aren't in California, we have a big state task force focused on this, but like just trying to make sure people are connected and we're funding the work that needs to happen, which includes, all this stewardship work and paying people, compensating people for participating in this and playing a bigger role. The other thing I'll mention is, if you are interested in doing some of this work and you want to seek funding for tribal lands, there's also the San Diego State University is the host for well, there'll be a session about this later, but one of the EPA technical assistance centers. We have a table out there, but part of the role of that technical assistance center is to help access resources, grant funds, that kind of thing. Climate Science Alliance is a partner. We have a number of partners across Region 9. So if you'd like to learn more about how we could help facilitate some of that resourcing, please come see us out there, or come find either me or Amber, any one of us on the team.
Thanks. Nina Hapner, Kashai Band of Pomo Indians. I really like the concept of having kind of like a toolkit or something that can be used and implemented in other places. I have not in the Southern California area, so Central California. And where we're at, we don't have a lot of federal forests, but we have a lot of state forests and private owned forests. And the other thing that we come across are headbutting moments with California Fish and Wildlife Service and the forest practice rules. So it'd be really nice to, because I was asking before he left, like, what's the land ownership? Because we talk, you've been talking a lot about the federal, but there's a lot of tribes that when you try to work with the state on their forest management, you run into roadblocks with them. And it would be interesting to see how you work with some of that here in the southern land, because I know where we're at. When we talk with California Fish and Wildlife Service, they disregard tribes' scientific input because they're a tribe, and that's directly from one of the tribal liaisons up in that area. And changing that perception is key. And honestly, I know EPA folks are here, but I have heard that from EPA project officers as well. Like, they don't give credit to tribes, even though our tribes have degreed people, in some cases PhDs. And then you have people, it doesn't matter whether you have a college degree, because you have life experience and you have that traditional knowledge, you have that family knowledge on how the landscape works. So it'd be really interesting to see how some of those perceptions are addressed with this tool as it moves forward, and advances that have been made, because I think that would be helpful throughout the state. Because Shia said, so, and I have one of my comments on vulnerabilities was that connectedness from the montane forest down to the underwater forest, because this all goes down to the ocean. And that's the forest fire that's going on in the ocean that people don't see because it's below the water. But that's impacted by what goes on up here in the montane forest. And so we're trying to, and that's all dealing with the state right now on that. And so, as I said, really interested in seeing this become a toolkit that any of the tribes could potentially use and fit their stuff in and arrange it how they need it. But also how you're dealing with some of those relationships that we're running, butting heads on, I guess.
Yours isn't on.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for saying that. I think the relationships that are built around the table with the tribal work group and having that relationality and the foundation being that is what has really, I think, brought the power and the energy and the attention for those state and federal agencies to pay attention and listen and realize that there is a lot of power when we are all together. And one thing that's really critical for us is the equal valuation for all ways of knowing. So whether that is an academic knowledge, whether that is tribal science or traditional knowledge or local knowledge, those are equally valued in these spaces. And we are seeing now, because of the respect and power that the tribal work group brings by being together, that those entities are trying to come, and people who actually have good intentions from those other entities that want to work with tribes that maybe don't know how. So I would love to talk with you more, because I think why we shared our model is that we want that to be an inspiration for what can be built in other places. And we have just launched a new initiative with partners across California, and it does have bleed over into, that's a terrible word, it does have connection into Nevada, which is our collaborative of Native nations for climate transformation and stewardship. And the vision of that is, how do we very intentionally connect to each other like a constellation, so that we are uplifting the perspectives and needs and priorities of the tribal communities and their projects, so that we get out of this competing against each other and instead uplift each other together. And so we have been successful with bringing the state and federal partners to the table where the tribes are leading, and they have to listen, and they are listening. So I think it's some of that dynamic of being connected that I'd be very happy to share more with you or anybody, but that is our intention, is that we want to replicate what our model looks like, and you take it and you make it relevant for your culture, for your region, but there is that power in being connected to each other and uplifting us all together. So I'd be happy to talk to you. And we do have a coastal initiative as well. And being connected with you would be really wonderful.
So, and that listening is great, but I really look forward to when they actually start doing, because they can listen. My thing is that sometimes we're speaking English, but we're not talking the same language. And until they actually start doing it and saying that, yeah, okay, we hear you. But when I actually see their actions reflect that, then I'll believe that. So not to be like, oh yeah, it's good that they're coming to the table. We have that happen where we're at, but when it comes to like put up or shut up, that doesn't happen. And so that's why I'm like, I'm really interested to see how you get over that hurdle and actually get that to happen.
And thank you for sharing those struggles. We haven't heard as much about issues with California Department of Fish and Wildlife from our partners. We are working closely with state parks, but I think the goal of what we're doing and what we're hearing from others like you sharing, what you're trying to do, I think we can learn from any example where we've had successes and build on those. And that's really what we're trying to do, is build our own successes, but also to look where where other folks have had success in overcoming these barriers and challenges to making this big transformative change in the paradigm for how this work happens. Was there one more slide?
It was the closing slide.
Okay.
And we are on time.
Yep.
We both of us, the Climate Science Alliance and Megan, we both have booths out front. We're sitting next to each other. if you want to talk more about this, or if you want our contact information, we'll wanting to connect. But before we do leave, I did want to say thank you for joining us, sharing your time with us, your knowledge, your expertise, your emotions, feelings, all the above. We sincerely appreciate it. But before we leave, it is our founder and lead advisor's birthday tomorrow. So if you guys want to sing happy birthday to her with me. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Amber. Happy birthday to you. All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It means a lot. So yes, thank you. Enjoy lunch. My stomach's growling, so